Text 19. Yamadutau tada praptau bhimo sharabashekshanau sadrishtva trasta hridaya shakrin mutram vimunchati. Yamadutau tada praptau bhimo sharabashekshanau sadrishtva trasta hridaya mutram vimunchati. यमदूतौ तदा प्राप्तौ भीमौ सरबशेक्षणौ सदृष्ट्वा त्रस्तहृदया शक्रिन्मूत्रं विमुञ्चति. Synonyms: Yamadutau, two messengers of Yamaraj. Tada, at the time, Praptau, arrived, Bhimau, terrible, Sarabasa, full of wrath, Ikshanau, their eyes, Saha, he, Drishtva, seeing, Trastha, frightened, Hridayaha, his heart, Shakrit, stool, Mutram, urine, Vimunchati, he passes. Translation and purport by History of English, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Translation: At death, he sees the messengers of the Lord of death come before him, their eyes full of wrath, and in great fear he passes stool and urine. Purport: There are two kinds of transmigration of a living entity after passing away from the present body. One kind of transmigration is to go to the controller of sinful activities, who is known as Yamaraja, and the other is to go to the higher planets up to Vaikunta. Here, Lord Kapila describes how persons engaged in the activities of sense gratification to maintain a family are treated by the messenger of Yamaraj, called Yamadutas. At the time of death, the Yamadutas become the custodians of those persons who have strongly gratified their senses. They take charge of the dying man and take him to the planet where Yamaraja resides. The conditions there are described in the following verses. ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपः कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरौ श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरुं वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगण रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादान् सहगणललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्णा करुणा सिन्धौ दीनबन्धौ जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कान्तराधा कान्त नमोऽस्तुते तप्त काञ्चन गौरङ्गी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभयश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। यमदूतौ तदा प्राप्तौ भीमौ शरभशेक्षणौ सदृष्ट्वा त्रस्त हृदय शक्रिन् मूत्रं विमुञ्चति. So after explaining so many topics, what are those topics? Bhakti in different gunas, like yogas, and other detailed topics, uh, Lord Kapila has started answering the question of Mother Devahuti about the life, birth, and death of a living entity. Right? So, Mother Devahuti asked in 29th chapter, third verse, I think, she asks, Dear Lord, please explain me about the life, sorry, birth and death of a living entity. So for that to answer that question, Kapiladev has started this chapter explaining the in the beginning he explains about the birth and the activities of a living entity in this world, right? Birth and the miseries and the pains that living entity goes through. The first part. So for the first part is from verse 1 to 18 of this chapter. He covered all those things. But this 19th verse is the second part of this chapter where this is post death, what happens to the living entity. So we will talk about what happens to the living entity after he dies, right? Or he or she dies. So basically, this is the first verse of it. What is he saying? Yamadutau tada praptau. When a living entity is engrossed strongly into this material activities, so Srila Prabhupada describes here um, how a person engaged in activities of sense gratification to maintain a firmly family are treated by the messengers of Yamaraj called Yamadutas. At the time of death, the Yamadutas become the custodians of those persons who have strongly gratified their senses. Okay. So what does it mean by strongly gratified by their senses? Means acting for their own self. Basically, they're looking after their family. They want to have engrossed, um, basically to please their children, to their wife, to the family members, to the relatives and friends, right? So in that act, what happens is they'll forget who is Krishna, they'll forget who is God, and they forget what they're supposed to do in this material world or the body they have gotten. They forget what they have to do with that body. Right? So when a persons are strongly engrossed like this in the material world, and that if that person dies, if you see the previous verse, it gives some clue, right? Thus, the man who engaged with uncontrolled senses in maintaining a family dies in great grief. So we have seen that, right? All the verses we went through, the life of a living entity, and he dies at the end in a great grief, seeing his relatives crying. He sees his relatives crying. He dies pathetically in great pain and without consciousness. He cannot do, and in the previous also verse also we saw that he cannot speak. He wants to speak, he wants to console them, but console them, but he cannot console them because he cannot speak. His throats are choked. His throat is choked with the um, yeah the mucus, so that he cannot speak. So in that stage, when he leaves the body, basically what happens is the Yamadutas come. Yamadutas, the two Yamadutas, Srila Prabhupada mentioned, at the death, he sees messengers of the Lord of Death come before him, their eyes full of wrath. So, how are the Yamadutas? The eyes full of wrath. The description of Yamadutas was given in uh, is given in the yeah. One second, let me. The description of Yamadutas was given in the uh, sixth canto, Kechit Kevalya Bhakti Agam. Okay. I think I had this somewhere. But anyway, so the description of Yamadusas were given in such a way that they look they look very, they have fears, they are fearsome living beings. So let me get there. I can get that's a nice verse. Bhagavatam, Canto 3. No, sorry, Canto 5. Canto 5. Actors of Maharaj. No, 26. Next chapter. Sorry, next canto, chapter 1. Maharaj Prashadana. No, there is. Okay. So then saw three awkward persons with deformed bodies. This is the verse I wanted to mention. Verse 28. Okay. So sapasha hastam strena drishtva purushan ati dharunam vaktratundam urdhvaromna atmanam netumagatan. So this is Ajamila story. When Ajamila was about to die, he saw three Yamadutas coming in there. So, how are they looking? They had Pasha Hastam, they had ropes in their hands, right? Ajamila then saw three awkward persons with deformed bodily features, peers, deformed bodily features, Vaktrahunda. Their bodies, their bodily features are not normal. They have like, twisted faces. They're not like humans, or I know, even though they have a face, but it's not proper face. It has it's a twisted face, and the hair standing erect on their bodies. So with these fierce twisted faces and hair standing erect on their bodies, when they see the features of Yamadutas, they're very scary. So just by seeing the scary features of that Yamaduta, what happens? So drishtva thrashta hridaya, the hearts get frightened. The living entity's heart gets frightened. They get completely perturbed by that vision of the Yamadutas. And what happens afterwards? They sakrin murtram vimunchati. So they passes the stool and the urine. This is the Shastra telling it. And I did some kind of I want to see if this is still applies to this material world or contemporary world, and I did some research. And there are so many people from the old age homes and from the embalmment. I don't know what this exact word, the embalmment team or embalming team who takes care of the dead bodies at the end. So they mentioned that that's true. Like 50% of the time, they see the people. Um, Passing the stool and urine after the death. So they have seen that. So meaning they found 50% of the time they found that the living entities or the human beings when they leave their body, they see that sakrin mutram vimunchati. So they still do it. So that means it still applies to this world. So what we're trying to discuss is that the Yamadutas are so scary. The heart gets frightened and they get basically Lord Kapiladev is explaining the scenario here. What happens to the living entity who's born entangled completely into this material world, right? So they're after that living entity sees the terrible features of Yamadutas, they passes the stool and the urine. So that is one part I want to say. But now, um, what happens? What happens to the living entity? Um, like this, like do they have to go through this, right? um After explaining the types of hells by Sukadev Goswami to Parikshit Maharaj asks one question, that is Canto 6 chapter 1. The question Parikshit Maharaj asks to Sukadev Goswami is that, uh, Gurudev, please tell me, how can a living entity come out of this pain? This is painful life. How can a living entity not go to hell? So how can we do that? How can we consider, or how can we avoid a living entity getting into this hellish conditions? Then Sukadeva Goswami says that the living entity has to go through the atonements. So what is an atonement? Atonement means um, you perform some bad activity. Let's say one living entity performs a killing of a brahmana, right? And for that, he has an atonement. What is atonement? The atonement is, do you have to do tulasi arati every morning, or you have to do some other arati, or some kind of like, for example, from the scriptures only, Krishna killed Arishtasura. Arishtasura is an ox. So when the Arishtasura was killed, um, Radharani and other gopis instructed Krishna to go and take bath in all different um, rivers on this earth. So all the sacred rivers on this earth. So that is an atonement. So what we're trying to see is that when Parikshit Maharaj asked for how a living entity can be taken out of these hellish conditions, taken out, like um, can be saved from these hellish conditions, then Sukadeva Goswami mentions that he should do the atonement. Parikshit Maharaj was not happy with that. He says that if a prisoner, if a thief, or if a culprit is put in behind the bars, right? That culprit behind the bars, he'll go through this punishment and he'll come out. After he was released, the proclivity itself is not gone. The proclivity to sin itself is not done. So he sins again. He does the same thing. Let's say um he has a habit of snatching the um like pickpocketing or something, some bad habit. But that habit will not stealing or pickpocketing will never go. So what he has to do, the yeah, then Sukadeva Goswami agrees that that's true. When a sinner sins, that proclivity to sin will never go. He may go through the atonement, but he'll come back. He go through the atonement, meaning he may go through the punishment. He may go through some remedies that were required. for that that were required to remove that sin. He can go through that, but he comes back and sin again, and this process will keep go on, meaning he will be entrapped. He'll somehow or other he'll get into the hellish planets, because this is never ending. So Sukadeva Goswami accepts, yes, that is true. Atonement is there, but the best path or the best way to get out of this kind of hellish condition is take to bhakti. And he talks about especially he mentions about the chanting of the Hare Krishna, especially in this Kali Yuga, and he tells about the story of Ajamila. So um, that thing we have gotten freely from Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada has given a nice system, right? Um, Nice system of how to act in this world, how to get out of this hellish conditions. Srila Prabhupada mentions that if a devotee in ISKCON, or if a devotee is practicing Krishna Bhakti, he will never have to see the hellish conditions or hellish planets. So that is one thing. And this is confirmed by Yamaraj also. Yamaraj mentions to the Yamadutas, right? When um, Ajamila chanted Narayan, Narayan, when at the time of death, he was calling his son. He was not calling the Narayana, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but he was calling his son. Then Yamadutas were saying that you are calling his son, so they came to capture him and take him to the Yamapuri. Now, Vishnudutas came and stopped them, right? And they that confused these Yamadutas. They were not trained in the essence or in the greatness of the chanting of the holy names and names of the Krishna. So they went back to Yamaraj and told him that this is what happened. He was chanting his son's name, but Vishnu, there some effulgent people, they came and they stopped us. Then they didn't let us take him back to you. Then Yamraj gave a whole chapter of lesson to the Yamadutas, whom to pick up and whom not to pick up. So in that instruction, Yamraj mentioned that if a person is wearing a tulasi in his neck, tulasi beads in his neck, if a person has a tilak on his forehead, and if a person is chanting the holy names, never ever, ever go to them, no matter how sinful that person is. So by fortunately was telling that by Srila Prabhupada's mercy, we got this. In when you are in ISKCON, you go to the temple, you go with tilak. You have to neck beads always, and somehow or other you hear or you chant the Krishna's name. So there is we don't have to. I mean, if this is followed, this will not affect us, or this will not put us into the hellish planet. But this verse is for a person who is completely engrossed in the uh, material activities. So does that mean that basically if we go further in the one final verses of this chapter, so Kapila Dev mentions that if a person is engrossed in the wife and his children, his sons, that's what it says. If you are completely engrossed in with the wife and sons, then uh, he will go back to the hellish planets. So what does that mean? So does that mean we should not really take care of the children and wife and um, just I mean just do the bhakti, which is basically what I'm trying to say is like, even though it says that you should not be completely engrossed, but there are some duties which were given to you. So the duties have to be performed. If we don't perform those duties, there is some um, hellish planet called as uh, Raura hellish planet, and you go to that hellish planet, right? So now what happened? So what will this Yamadutas do? Yamadutau tada praptau bhimo sarvasekshanav, right? They're very terribly looking. So drishtva trashta hidaya sakrin mutram vimuchati. So what will happen to that living entity is this these Yamadutas, they will carry this living entity to the Pitruloka, to the Yamraj. So where does Yamraj lives? Yamraj lives in Pitruloka. So where is Pitruloka? Pitruloka is between the heavenly. Let's look at the one universe, right? In the one universe, It is a um, yeah, it's a shallow shell, right? And in that one universe, we have 14 planetary systems, and below the 14 planetary system, there is a ocean. So, what is the name of that ocean? Garbhodaka ocean, right? Garbhodaka Shai Vishnu lives there. So, in between that ocean and the bottom planet, the Pathala, there is some area. In that area, we find Pitraloka. So, Pitraloka is right there. So, so what is the capital city of Pitraloka? The capital city of Pitraloka is Vaivashvata. What is the capital city of Swargaloka? The capital city of Swargaloka is Amravati. So every demigod has their own planets, and in the planet there is capital cities also, or their places. Indra lives in the Amravati, and Yamaraj lives in the Vaivashvatapura. So that is the capital city. So, does that mean that this Pitraloka is also hellish planet? No. So there are in the sixth canto, as I mentioned, so there are 28 hells, 28 types of hells described, narakas, the 28 types of narakas described by Sukadeva Goswami to Parikshit Maharaj. Yeah, this is on the sorry, last chapter of fifth canto. So 28 types of hells were described. So these 28 hells are around Pitraloka. They're not in Pitraloka. Meaning, when the Yamadutas carry the living entity, they'll just first carry that living entity to the Vaivashvatapura, or the capital city of Yamaraj, or they'll take them to the Yamaraj. Okay. So when the living entity was carried to the Yamaraj, the distance between it's given that the distance between the earth and the Vaivashvatapura is about 99,000 yojanas. One yojana is about 8 miles. So it will come up to 752,000 miles of distance, right, from Earth to the Vaivashvatapura. And in that Vaivashvatapura, when the living entity was carried to the Yamapuri, to the Vaivashvatapura, when the living entity is carried by Yamadutas to the Yamaraj, Yamaraj will judge them, will tell them, okay, you have done, they'll validate what you are, what you have done in the previous life, and what are the kind of consequences they need to go through, and he will be put into, after that judgment is done, he will be put into different hellish planets. There are 28 described in Srimad Bhagavatam. In some other scriptures they say 31, some say 21. So but in Srimad Bhagavatam, we'll go with Srimad Bhagavatam. So that is 28 hells were described. So this living entity will be placed into different hellish conditions, or different planets of the hell, to go and suffer that beings. So what kind of a body? How do that living entity suffer? That living entity will be given a temporary body, which is a body which is made specifically for suffering. Let's say in this world we have a this human body. When we that body which will be given by the Yamadutas, temporary body, to the subtle body, is basically is a covering of that subtle body, right? So that covering, what happens is, the pain what we experience in this human body is 10 times or more uh, in that body. With that covering, we suffer. Basically, that body is made to suffer. That covering of the subtle body is made to suffer, or to feel the pain, right? So this is what happens when the when the living entity, when the Yamadutas take that living entity to the Yamapuri. Sorry, I'm saying that Yamapuri again, but it's Vaivashvatapura. So, and Yamaraj judges them and puts them into the hellish conditions. Now, hellish planets. So, the living entity has to go through hellish planets. So, what are those hellish hells? There are 28 types of hells. I want to tell a few of them. Tamishra is one of the hell. The first one, it is explained. It is intended for a person who grabs another's wealth, wife, or children. In this dark realm, he is bound with ropes and starved without food or water. He is beaten and reproached by Yamadutas till he faints. So that is Tamishra. Andhata Mishra is blind darkness. Here, a man who deceives another man and enjoys his wife or children is tormented to the extent he loses his intelligence and sight. The torture is described as cutting the tree at its roots. And there is Raurava. So this was the one which I want to talk. Raurava, fearful or hell of Rurus. As per the Bhagavata Purana and Devi Bhagavata Purana, it is assigned for a person who cares about his own and his family's good, but harms other living beings and is always envious of others. So we have to protect ourselves from these bad habits of being uh, selfish and of being are trying to grab others property or resources, the resources meant for others. It can be anything, right? Big, no wastage. This is all Krishna's creation, and Krishna has given each and every resource for according to their needs. We cannot go and grab others' resources also. The living beings hurt by such a man take a form of savage serpent, like beasts called roos, and torture this person. So the Vishnu Purana deems this hell fit for a false witness or one who lies. So one who lies or one who does the false witness. So it's they also get into the Raurava. So basically, it's telling that when um, we cannot take on sides also. It says that you should not take sides until you know exactly who it is. Like sometimes we take sides of our the people who we like, but that should not be the case. In Maharaurava, a person who indulges at the expense of others beings is afflicted with pain and by fears. Ruru is called. Okay, that's another thing. There is a person who cooks. So there is something called as Kumbhipaka. There is something called as Kalasutra. There are like that. We have 28 types of hells. So the living entity has to go through these 28 types of hells if he is not following the bhakti, right? So um, yeah. So the devotee's condition is that whatever condition they're put into, they don't mind, uh, they don't care. They just want the mercy of the Krishna, and they just want to be the servant of Krishna. So we know from today's Friday, so I can go 1 2 minutes extra. Okay. So and also I joined late. Sorry for that. So I'll continue. So our King Kulashekara mentions in Mukunda Mala Stotra that Naham Vande Tava Charanayor Advanda Hetuhu Kumbi Pakam Gurumapi Hare Narakam Napanetum Ramya Rama Mridutanu Madan Nandane Napirantum Bhave Bhave Hridaya Bhavane Bhavayeyam Bhavantam. So this is the fourth verse of Mukunda Mala Stotra. He mentions that O Krishna, O Lord Hari, it is not to be saved from the dualities of. So basically, you put me. I'm praying to you, or I'm praying to the lotus feet of you, not to save myself from the miseries of this material world, or not to save myself from the naraka, kumbi paka naraka. So it's not because all this, or not because I want some women or to enjoy with the women. I'm asking you, or I'm praying to you because birth after birth, I want to see you in my heart. I want to keep you in my heart. In the similar terms, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also mentions that Ashlishyava padaratham pinastamam adarshanan mam marmahatam karotava yatha tatava vidadatu lampato matprananatastu sayeva napara. So, oh Krishna, you crush me with your harsh um, um, embrace, or you make me broken hearted by not presenting in before me whatever you do in whichever way you want to do, but still I'm your uh, I'm your servant, or um, you are my worshipable Lord unconditionally, right? Mat prananatastu sayevanapara. You are my worshipable Lord. There is no conditions applied. You treat me whichever way. You put me in the hell, you put me in the heaven, you give me this, you don't, but you are my Lord. So that is so after describing all these hellish conditions and the material world and all these miseries of a living entity, so I want to close this class with this positive note where we have a hope. a devotee will not get into these hellish conditions, because the condition of a devotee or the prayers of devotees are completely different. It doesn't matter what we have to go through. The thinking of a devotee is like Krishna is our supreme personality of Godhead, and we have to um, attach our senses to him. So then the results are different. We always give the results to Krishna. So whatever the results Krishna has designed us, or whatever we have to go through, let us go through. But let's not forget Krishna. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Hari Bol, thank you very much, Hari Krishna Prabhu. We like to wish everybody a safe and Krishna conscious day and weekend ahead. We like to offer our prayers to the Supreme Lord by chanting Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Krishna
Krishna
Hare Hare,
Krishna,
Hare Rama, Hare Rama,
Hare
Rama
Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama.
Hare Krishna, Hare
Hare
Krishna,
Krishna, Hare
Krishna
Krishna,
Hare Hare,
Krishna
Hare
Krishna,
Rama, Hare Rama, Rama
Hare
Rama,
Rama,
Hare
Hare
Hare.
Rama. Hare Krishna,
Hare
Hare
Krishna,
Krishna,
Krishna
Krishna
Krishna,
Krishna,
Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare
Hare
Rama,
Rama, Hare Rama,
Rama,
Rama
Hare Hare.
Rama.
Shri Nrsimha Jai Nrsimha Jai Jai Nrsimha Pralate Jaya Padma Mukha Padma Bringam
Veeram
Ugraveera Mahavishnu
Mahavishnu,
Chalantam
Jalantam
Sarvabhaumam
Sarvakam,
Narsingam Vishyanam
Darsanam
Bhadram
Vishnu
Nityam Nityam
Bhadram
Namiham
Namami.
Nrsimha Bhagwana ki Jai Prahlad
Jai,
Maharaj ki Jai.
Jai.
Let's offer our humble obeisances to all the assembled Vaishnavas. Vanchakalpatarubhasya Kripa
Vanchakalpatarubhasya
Sindhubhaya
Kripa
Krishna
Sindhu Bhavati. Patitanam
Patitanam
Pavanam
Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo
Vaishnavebhyo
Namaha
Namo Namah.
Vaishnavinda ki Jai Granth
Jai,
Bhagavatam ki Jai Srila
Jai,
Prabhupada ki Jai Gaur
Jai.
Jai Hari Hari Hari.
Hari 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 Bol.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Thank you everybody. Hari Bol. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.